Christopher Nolan has directed 12 feature films. He has never once put a scene after the credits. Not for Batman, not for Inception, not for Oppenheimer. So when the Odyssey ends and the lights are still down and the score is still playing, most people in that theater are already halfway up the aisle. That is a mistake, because this time, Nolan did leave something behind. It just isn't a scene. It's a song. And the story of how that song got made is honestly a better hook than most post-credit scenes Marvel has ever produced. Let's get into it. If you're new here, this is the channel where we take one movie story and actually dig into it, instead of just repeating the headline. So today it's 3 things. First, why the Odyssey is already the biggest theatrical swing of 2026. Second, what Nolan actually did in those credits, and why it matters more than people realize. Third, whether any of this points towards sequel, because the internet has already made up its mind about that, and the internet is, as usual, getting ahead of itself. Quick setup for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. The Odyssey is Nolan's adaptation of Homer's poem, running just under 3 hours, rated R, and built around Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, trying to get home to Ithaca after the Trojan War. Waiting for him is his wife Penelope, played by Hathaway, who is fending off a house full of suitors who assume her husband is dead. And there's his son Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, who barely remembers his father and is trying to figure out what kind of man he's supposed to become without him. That's the plot on paper. What makes it interesting as a piece of filmmaking is the scale. Nolan shot this entire movie using IMAX cameras, which has never happened before on a feature film. Not partially, not for the big set pieces. The whole thing. If you manage to catch a 70mm IMAX screening, and there are only a small number of theaters worldwide equipped to run true 70mm film, you're seeing something closer to the format's absolute technical ceiling. That's part of why advance tickets for those specific showtimes were selling out more than a year before release. Now here's where it gets genuinely impressive, and this is the part most coverage undersells. Heading into opening weekend, tracking had the Odyssey somewhere between $90 and $120 million domestically. Thursday preview screenings alone brought in around $17.6 million. For context, that beat Toy Story 5's preview number, and Toy Story 5 was the biggest movie of the year up to that point. Industry analysts started projecting a Friday, including previews, of around $50 million, which put the full 3-day opening weekend in the $117 to $120 million range. To put that in perspective, Nolan's last film, Oppenheimer, opened to $82 million in 2023, and that movie went on to cross $900 million worldwide and won Best Picture. The Odyssey is on pace to beat that opening by roughly $35 million, and is doing it without a rival blockbuster sharing the weekend the way Barbie shared it with Oppenheimer. There's another number worth sitting with. This is also shaping up as the biggest opening weekend for an R-rated film so far in 2026, ahead of every other adult-oriented release this year. An R-rated, nearly 3-hour historical epic outperforming most PG-13 franchise films at the box office is not something that happens often anymore. It tells you something about where Nolan sits in the industry right now. Studios still don't fully trust original, expensive adult filmmaking. Audiences apparently still show up for it if the person behind the camera has earned that trust. Okay, now to the actual reason we're here. Every movie has music playing over its credits. Most of the time it's forgettable, or it's a licensed song a marketing team picked to sell soundtracks. Nolan has always treated it differently. The Prestige closed with a Tom York track. The Dark Knight just let Hans Zimmer's score breathe. It's usually restrained. The Odyssey ends with something new. An original song called When I'm Home, performed by Travis Scott and James Blake, produced and composed with Ludwig Göransson, who also scored Oppenheimer and Tenet. Scott raps as a version of Odysseus mid-journey, worn down, calling out for guidance. James Blake takes on something like the voice of a siren, answering him in a slow, minimal hook. It's a genuine collaboration, not a licensed needle drop stapled onto the ending. Here's the detail that actually matters, and it's easy to miss if you're not paying attention to the credits text. Christopher Nolan is listed as one of the song's writers. This is the first time in his entire career he has a songwriting credit on anything. A director who has spent 25 years being famously private about his process sat down and helped write lyrics for a rap and R&B track. That's not a small thing. And because awards voters read credits too, this technically makes Nolan Oscar eligible in the Best Original Song category, on top of whatever nominations the Odyssey picks up elsewhere. There's also history here that makes it less random than it sounds. Travis Scott worked with Göransson before on a track called The Plan for Tenet back in 2020. That was Scott's first original song written for a film, and by his own account at the time, he was genuinely proud of it. Nolan apparently felt the same way, because this time Scott didn't just get invited back to record a song. He got cast in the movie itself, playing a bard who performs stories of Odysseus's exploits within the film. So the guy singing about the journey in the credits also plays the character telling that same story on screen. That's a detail Nolan clearly built in on purpose, and it rewards people who actually stay seated instead of leaving the second the screen goes black. Step back for a second, because there's a bigger pattern here worth naming. Nolan has spent his career treating music as structural, not decorative. Hans Zimmer's ticking clocks in Dunkirk, the nonlinear score choices in Tenet, mirroring the film's own backward-forward structure. Göransson's use of period-accurate instruments for the Odyssey, including dozens of bronze gongs, ancient lyres, and an aulos, which is a reed instrument that would have actually existed in the Bronze Age setting the film, is depicting. That's the kind of detail almost no one in the audience consciously registers, but it's part of why his films feel dense on rewatch. Putting himself on the writing credit for When I'm Home fits that same instinct. It's not a marketing stunt. It reads more like a director who spent 3 years living inside Homer's language, deciding he had something to say in that voice too, and choosing to say it through a genre he doesn't usually touch. Whether or not it wins anything, it's a genuinely unusual move for someone at his level of the industry, and worth remembering next awards season regardless of what happens with the film itself. Now for the question everyone actually clicked on. Does the ending set up a sequel? Short answer. Not directly. And here's the reasoning, kept spoiler light. The finale does shift the status quo for its characters, and it leaves the door open to a larger mythic world beyond Ithaca. Greek mythology itself doesn't stop where the Odyssey poem stops. There are ancient continuations, like the Telegony, that pick up Odysseus's story afterward. So the source material technically supports more story existing. But nothing here functions as an actual setup. As of right now, neither Universal nor Nolan has announced or even hinted at a follow-up. And structurally, Nolan doesn't work that way. He's never made a sequel to an original concept film in his entire filmography, only continuing the Batman trilogy, which was a franchise he inherited rather than one he built from nothing. Given that this film wasn't pitched or marketed as the start of anything ongoing, the far more likely outcome is that this stays a self-contained epic, the same way Oppenheimer or Interstellar did. Could the box office change that calculus? Sure, money talks in this industry, and a run this strong gives Universal every incentive to ask the question. But even if a follow-up got greenlit, it's hard to imagine Nolan returning to direct it, and harder still to imagine this cast signing back on without him attached. The realistic take is this. The mythology could easily continue. The Nolan version of it, in all likelihood, ends here, so here's where that leaves things. The Odyssey isn't just performing well, it's on track to be the biggest live-action opening of the year and Nolan's strongest debut in over a decade. The credits hide a genuinely rare moment. A director stepping into songwriting for the first time at 60-some films into people knowing his name. And the sequel talk, while understandable, is almost certainly just talk for now. If you've already seen it, I want to know what you thought of When I'm Home specifically. Drop that in the comments, because reactions to it online have been split, and I think that's actually interesting. If you haven't seen it yet, this is your reminder. Stay through the credits. Not for a twist. Just because it's rare to watch a filmmaker try something genuinely new this late into a career this accomplished. Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives instead of surface-level recaps, and I'll see you in the next one.